The Soap Maker of Correggio, Italy's most notorious female serial killer, Leonarda Cianciulli. Leonarda would murder 3 women who considered her a friend in the small Italian village of Correggio, Italy in 1940. More disturbing than the crimes themselves was her actions after the murders, eventually making her a household name throughout Italy. Leonarda Cianciulli was born on November 14, 1893 to Mariano and Emilia di Nolfi in Montella, Italy. She was conceived after her father Mariano kidnapped and raped her mother Emilia, and her parents only married because Emilia became pregnant. When Leonarda was an infant, her mother really struggled with connecting with her and being able to love her daughter, mainly because the pregnancy was the result of such a violent and traumatic event. A year or so after Leonarda was born, her father Mariano passed away, leaving her mother as a widow. Emilia remarried fairly quickly, but even after she enters a happier marriage, she still struggled to form a connection with her eldest child and would often be emotionally abusive. With her second husband, Emilia welcomed a few more children. Leonarda spent a lot of her childhood playing alone, and she was additionally ushered away from her siblings since she suffered from a few ailments, including epilepsy, which her mother and stepfather viewed as a burden. In her preteen years, Leonarda attempted to hang herself twice. During the first attempt, her family stopped her, with her mother making it clear to her afterwards her disappointment in the attempt being unsuccessful. And during the second attempt, the rope broke. Leonarda tried as best she could to make the most of her teenage years. Luckily, at school, she made a tight-knit group of friends. Her friends knew and hung around with quite a few older guys, which is how Leonarda met office clerk Raffaele Pansardi. Leonarda was smitten with Raffaele, and the two began a relationship, and would marry in 1917, with her mother cursing her on her wedding day. "No child of yours will ever survive." Leonarda feared what her future would hold, and she found some comfort in visiting fortune-tellers. One gypsy fortune-teller she visited early on in her marriage reportedly told her, "You will marry and have children, but all your children will die." Soon after, she visited a palm reader who told her, "In your right hand I see prison, in your left a criminal asylum." The couple enjoyed their first years of marriage, and lived in a relative quiet and happy life together in the Alta Irpinia Peninsula. Over the course of their marriage, Leonarda would have 17 pregnancies. She suffered 3 miscarriages, and lost 10 children, either in childbirth or in infancy. By 1929, 37-year-old Raffaele and 36-year-old Leonarda had 3 surviving children, 11-year-old Giuseppe, 10-year-old Bernardo, and 6-year-old Biagio. In 1930, the area suffered a major earthquake. With their home and nearly all their belongings destroyed, the family were forced to relocate. They then settled down in the village of Correggio, in the province of Reggio Emilia, located about 38 miles north of Bologna, Italy. Not long after the move, Leonarda became pregnant, and unfortunately she would miscarry. But in 1934, the couple welcomed their 4th child and only surviving daughter, Norma. After the move, the family initially struggled financially. However, they did later receive a sum of money for compensation for the damage the earthquake had caused to their previous home. Using this money, Leonarda opened a small shop in Correggio. She did many things from this shop. She sold various homemade baked goods and sweets, handmade soaps. She would sell used clothing, and also would perform palm readings, or astronomy and spiritual readings as well. Her business was very successful, and along with her involvement in community endeavors, Leonarda was a very well-liked and respected citizen of Reggio Emilia. By all accounts, through all her struggles and hardships, it seemed as though Leonarda created a happy and fulfilling life for herself and her family. But the words her mother had cursed her with on her wedding day never left her mind. Leonarda's quaint and quiet life came crashing down in 1939. Where her eldest surviving child, Giuseppe, who she had an extremely close relationship with, received notice that he was being drafted to the Italian army for World War II. Leonarda was not prepared to deal with the thought of losing another child, and she turned to desperate measures. Leonarda came to the conclusion that the only way she was able to break the curse and be guaranteed Giuseppe's safety in the war was to make human sacrifices. She quickly identified women living in her neighborhood that frequently visited her for advice and really trusted her. 73-year-old Faustina Setti was a neighbor of Leonarda's, who as she approached older age really struggled with her romantic life. She had never married and often would confide in Leonarda about how lonely she was.
Hello everyone, I'm Priyanka and welcome to my channel. Please support my channel by like, comment, share, and subscribe my channel. Esmeralda Riches was a vibrant 16-year-old girl living in the Dominican Republic, known for her bright smile and ambition. She was a beloved daughter, friend, and student. However, her promising life was cut tragically short, thrusting her into the center of a case that shocked the nation and brought to light serious issues concerning the safety and protection of minors. On the night of February 13, 2023, Esmeralda was reportedly in the company of several individuals, including her teacher John Kelly Martinez and her cousin, who was a minor. The details of the evening remain murky, but it was later revealed that Esmeralda and her companions were traveling together in a vehicle. The night took a dark turn, leading to a series of events that culminated in Esmeralda's death. Esmeralda's body was found in her home under circumstances that initially suggested suicide. The discovery was made in the early hours of February 14, 2023. However, the nature of her injuries and the evidence at the scene quickly raised suspicions. Her family, friends, and community members were devastated, struggling to understand how such a tragedy could have occurred. The Dominican authorities launched an investigation into Esmeralda's death. Initial findings suggested inconsistencies with the suicide theory. Forensic evidence pointed to signs of physical trauma that were inconsistent with self-inflicted injuries. As investigators delved deeper, they discovered troubling details that indicated Esmeralda might have been sexually assaulted and then murdered to cover up the crime. John Kelly Martinez, Esmeralda's teacher, quickly became a central figure in the investigation. Martinez had a history of inappropriate behavior, and witnesses came forward with allegations of misconduct. Esmeralda's cousin, who was with her that night, also faced scrutiny. Martinez and the cousin were arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including sexual assault and murder. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community and ignited a firestorm of public outrage. The legal proceedings were closely monitored by the media, with every development fueling further public interest and anger. The prosecution presented a strong case, supported by forensic evidence and witness testimonies. Esmeralda's family, represented by determined legal advocates, sought justice for their daughter. During the trial, graphic details of the assault and subsequent cover-up emerged. The prosecution argued that Martinez had abused his position of power and trust, exploiting Esmeralda and then taking drastic measures to silence her. Esmeralda's case struck a chord with the Dominican public. Protests, vigils, and demonstrations were held across the country, demanding justice for Esmeralda and greater protections for minors. The case highlighted systemic issues within the educational and legal systems, prompting calls for widespread reforms. Advocacy groups and NGOs intensified their efforts to protect minors and support victims of abuse. The public demanded accountability, not only for the perpetrators, but also for the institutions that allowed such abuses to occur. In a landmark ruling, Martinez was found guilty of all charges. The court sentenced him to a lengthy prison term, sending a clear message about the severity of his crimes. Esmeralda's cousin, who was also implicated, received a sentence appropriate to his level of involvement. The verdict was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow. While justice was served, nothing could bring back the vibrant young girl whose life had been so brutally taken. The tragic case of Esmeralda Riches left an indelible mark on Dominican society. It sparked a national conversation about gender violence, the protection of minors, and the accountability of those in positions of authority. The public outcry led to increased support for victims of abuse and a push for legislative changes to ensure that perpetrators are swiftly and justly punished. Esmeralda's legacy lives on through the reforms and initiatives inspired by her story. Her case serves as a reminder of the critical importance of safeguarding young people and holding those who harm them accountable. Esmeralda Riches' death was a profound tragedy that exposed deep flaws in societal and institutional structures meant to protect the vulnerable. Her story is a poignant reminder of the need for vigilance, justice, and reform. While her life was tragically cut short in 1943, Leonarda wrote a 748-page long memoir called Le Confessioni di un'anima amareggiata, or in English, An Embittered Soul's Confessions. In the book, she described her soap-making methods and how she used her victims' remains in meticulous detail.
After over 5 years in police custody, the triple murder trial began on June 12, 1946, at the Civil and Criminal Court in Reggio Emilia. The prosecutors were Giulio Lorenz and Mivio Magnarini, and Giulio Fornaciari defended Leonarda. Spectators from far and wide heard the stories about Leonarda and her crimes in the papers, and waiting outside the courtroom for hours in hopes of getting a glimpse at the trial. Throughout the trial, Leonarda did not show any remorse, and while the accounts of the crimes were being reported to the court, she would often chime in and correct them. It was reported that as she spoke of her crimes, her dark eyes gleamed with a wild inner pride. On July 29 of 1946, closing arguments were held. During these final moments in the trial, Leonarda was described as softly weeping with her head resting on her head. The jury was released to deliberate at 1:15 p.m. Just 2.5 hours later, at 53 years old, Leonarda Cianciulli was found guilty on the counts of premeditated, aggravated, and continuous triple murder, 3 counts of robbery, and 3 counts of desecration of a corpse. The courts found her semi-insane and ordered that part of her 30-year must be served in an insane asylum. He did appeal her case a few times and then also at one point asked for a pardon, all of which were denied. Throughout her sentence, Leonarda was often transferred to various prisons throughout Italy. Eventually she was transferred to the judicial asylum for women in Pozzuoli, Italy. When she was in prison, she often spent her free time writing her memoirs, crocheting, and she also was said to love to bake for the nuns and fellow prisoners. On Nun recalled, "Despite the scarce means at our disposal, she prepared very tasty sweets that none of the inmates dared to eat." Her children were said to have visited her often. In the aftermath of the trial, all of Leonarda's family moved away from Correggio, and it is not known how they spent the rest of the days or if she has any remaining direct relatives. Leonarda Cianciulli passed away due to cerebral apoplexy while in the Pozzuoli Women's Criminal Asylum on October 15, 1970. She was 77 years old. Today, the axe, cleaver, hacksaw, hammer, and a cauldron taken from Leonarda's home can be seen on display at the Criminological Museum in Rome.